Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good morning, everyone. We begin this week with reaction to the stunning week of events in Afghanistan. President Biden pledging to get all Americans trapped in Afghanistan out of that country and back home. Friday, he announced the U.S. has 6,000 troops at the airport in Kabul, and that the U.S. has evacuated 13,000 people in less than 2 weeks. The president also said the U.S. will offer help to those Afghani citizens who helped U.S. forces during the 20 years of war.
The past week has been heartbreaking. We've seen gut-wrenching images of panicked people acting out of sheer desperation. You know, it's completely understandable. They're frightened, they're sad, uncertain what happens next. I don't think any one of us can see these pictures and not feel that pain on a human level. Now we have a mission to complete in Afghanistan. It's an incredibly...
Representative Jackie Walorski joins us now, home for the moment, but never far in her mind, clearly, from what's happening both in the capital and in Afghanistan. Thanks for being with us. Let's jump right in with what's happening in the Middle East. The scenes clearly are distressing wherever you come at this from. Would you call what's happening an American failure? And if so, at what level and how far back does that stretch?
Well, I think this is a national disgrace laying right at the feet of President Biden. It's inexcusable. You know, never in my history, since I've been in Congress, have I seen an American president, a commander in chief, negotiate with terrorists and then beg terrorists for mercy and asked terrorists who just took over a country that we had freed for 20 years, asking them for permission. I mean, you don't even hear this. This is not in the psyche or the mind of any Americans. American presidents don't do that. And, you know, the number one goal here, and this is shifting obviously by the minute, shifting by the hour, but the number one goal here from every American is to hold this president accountable for getting every single American from behind enemy lines and get them out of Afghanistan safely and alive. I mean, this is not going away. You know, the White House is, I think, pretending that this is going to go away if we quit talking about it. We're not going to quit talking about this. This is not who we are as Americans. It's unforgivable. It's a disgrace. And he's the only one that can turn this around. He needs to give the order to expand that area around the embassy, around the airport, like France and Britain are, and they need to go in and get our American people, and they need to get the Afghanis that helped us that are vetted to get out. But this isn't going away. And I don't know how he thinks that, not talking about it or not being involved, it is going to happen. We don't do this as Americans.
Do you feel that anything in terms of decisions that can be second-guessed stretch back beyond this presidency? President Trump, his late dealings with the Taliban, the decision to set a deadline to pull out, any of those missteps?
Here's the thing. We don't have time to go back and second-guess. We could do that with an investigation. I was on a call yesterday with former Secretary Pompeo, who talked about the plan that they did have. And it was methodical and it was strategic and it would have absolutely worked. And there's time for that. But right now, if you're an American behind enemy lines with the radical extremist Taliban, you have one thought in mind is that I'm going to die in this place if the largest, most sophisticated country in the United States Air Force and the United States, armed forces come and get me. There's time to look back at second guessing and there's time for blame. But all I see right now coming from Washington is this. It's her fault. Why don't we put that on the side? Have the commander in chief make an order that our American people need to be evacuated now and get them out alive, or we're going to see horror scenes, or we're not going to see anything at all. Once the American planes are done, and the Taliban completely takes up and seals up the rest of the country, you're not going to see a piece of video coming from there. You're not going to hear the cry of an American. It will be silenced. We have very little time, got to deal with the situation we have. We need to bring all the scale and power and veracity of the American military to free our people. Maybe if you're Nancy Pelosi, we ought to put off next week voting on a $3.5 trillion wish list for the left liberals in this country. Take that money and save our Americans now.
You made very clear this week that you're very concerned about the veterans, the people, service members who spent 20 years in various forms and fashion in Afghanistan. I want you to expand on that.
Absolutely. So, when I was first in HASC, I was on the Armed Services Committee for 4 years. I was in Afghanistan, met and, greeted and thanked our troops. I'm really concerned. The cost of lives of what's happened in the last 20 years, the cost of lives that could have been killed. Our folks go in there. We keep Americans safe for 20 years while we occupied and took care of and trained and educated Afghanistan. So we have veterans here today, and I have a lot of veterans in my district. And, I want to make sure that they have the resources they need. I want to thank them for what they've done for the last 20 years. They kept Americans safe. They kept the fight out of this country. And I think that, we're making a mistake if we don't make sure that we thank our veterans, thank their families, make sure they have the services they need. The 1-800 number for the suicide hotline for veterans and all of the local numbers around the state of Indiana. Indiana's here to help. We're here to help. We want to make sure they get the services they need. They kept us free. They kept us safe. And I think when we look at veterans, we can't thank them enough. And my heart goes out to them right now, watching the commander-in-chief do something that's the most irresponsible, dangerous thing that's happening under his watch, and only he can correct it. But I want to make sure our veterans know that they paid the price, and we are forever in their debt for keeping our nation free.
I want to make sure I understand clearly what you would like the president to do at this point. We do have this looming issue of the deadline, whether to extend it, whether to bring more troops back to get more people out. What do you think?
I think he needs to do whatever's possible. I think if we need to delay these votes in Congress of $3.5 trillion to a left-wing agenda, I think you ought to take that money and put it to solve this problem. If he has to bring 20,000 troops back, bring them back alive and bring them back to this country. It's completely irresponsible that we're planning on going in under the direction of Nancy Pelosi next week to blow more money and more into our debt when he needs to take those resources right now and move them into this operation of getting the Americans and our Afghani allies out and home safely. If he needs to extend that deadline, extend it. If he needs to bring more troops in to open up that perimeter so Americans can safely get to the airport and not get stopped or shot or killed by the Taliban, he needs to do that. There are many alternatives out there that I think common sense Hoosiers are looking at saying, well, do this or do that. He's not doing anything. And this lies square at his feet.
Representative Jackie Walorski, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Strong words there. We also talked to Indiana Congressman Larry Bucshon about the immediate future in Afghanistan. He says it starts with securing the airport in Kabul.
And we need to get out into the country and find Americans who are trapped and remove them from the country in the most expedient way that we can. But we also don't want to leave behind the people, the Afghani people that assisted us over 20 years, because right now there's messages coming out of Afghanistan that the Taliban are going door to door, hunting those people down and executing them. So, we need to continue to do those things. As far as the Afghan country going forward, it's in the hands of the Taliban, and I don't see at this point that being changed. We just need to work with the international community to pressure them to maintain some human rights, especially with women and children, because that's not their history. So I think on the international stage, we need to pressure our allies to help us pressure the Taliban to make sure that they treat their people well.
While your congressional perspective is what we seek in conversations like this, you also, too, bring a military perspective from it as well through the Naval Reserve. What about this deadline, end of the month, at a time where clearly a military presence is still needed there? What would you, at this moment, think is appropriate? More manpower going back, keeping what we have? Where should things go?
No, I don't think we can go backwards now. I think the role of the military now is going to be to continue to secure the airport in Kabul. I've been to Afghanistan a couple of years ago, flown into Kabul, been to Bagram Air Force Base. I think it was a mistake to give that up, for example, because they have a couple of runways there that could have evacuated people. But we can't go backwards now. I think the role going forward of the U.S. military is going to safely get our people, our allies, and the Afghan citizens that helped us out of the country.
What then do you feel is the immediate and then long-term future of the Middle East with new instability and the likelihood of Taliban leadership for the foreseeable future in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see going forward, but we know what the past has brought us, right? The Taliban are in cahoots with Al Qaeda, and ISIS didn't exist the last time the Taliban was in power, but now it does. And those cells are present in Afghanistan. That was primarily one of our roles in staying there up until this point, was to make sure those terrorist cells didn't have a safe haven in the country. So I think going forward, it's going to be difficult now with the Taliban in control of that area of the world. And all we can do is make sure America gets the message out that we're not going to tolerate terrorist cells and terrorism, no matter where it is in the world. But in Afghanistan, in the near future, it's going to be a substantial problem to handle.
And coming up, a new push for the state to waive millions of dollars in unemployment repayments. We'll explain next. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics. A leading Democratic state senator says it's time for the state to waive millions of dollars in unemployment overpayment repayments. We've been telling you about those for weeks now, and in an op-ed this week, Senator Karen Tallien says the overpayments are not the fault of Hoosiers, that they were assured that they could apply and follow the rules at the time. She also writes, placing this level of financial stress on Hoosier families is unnecessary, as the federal government also gave states the authority to waive those repayments.
So first of all, it was the federal money, not ours. And the second thing is, Indiana has put into the UI Trust Fund $900 million of federal money. Some of it came from CARES, some of it came from ARP. We have the money to waive those payments. You have to at least prove that you were a legitimate resident of the state of Indiana, that you had a job, that you lost your job. But all this picky stuff, well, you didn't have the right documents and you didn't have this or that. We need to get by that. We need to get past it.
We also asked Governor Eric Holcomb what his office is doing to help fix the backlog of thousands of cases. Look.
As we go through them, some of those don't qualify. We have to make sure with 100% certainty that we're not being frauded. We get hit every day by people who are trying to fraud us. Not all of those are, obviously, but we've got to do our due diligence and make sure they are a worthy recipient of that funding.
And coming up, the fallout from President Biden with the chaos in Afghanistan. Our political experts talk about that next. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome back our political experts. Brian Gaddy is a Democrat and Republican Whitley Yates. Good to see you both. It's been a tough week for the Biden administration as chaos continues to erupt in Afghanistan. Brian, we'll start with you here. How do you think the administration has handled the blowback?
I think President Biden has handled it well. Trying to extricate ourselves from Afghanistan was never going to be easy anyway. I mean, it's a country that there's an old saying in history, it's where empires go to die. I mean, the Soviet Union didn't do well there. The British didn't do well there. We've done, I think, a very good job considering since 9/11, we have been hit again from that country where Al Qaeda was obviously using it as a launching pad, working in cahoots with the Taliban. So from that standpoint, I think we've accomplished what we've accomplished. And obviously President Obama succeeded in eliminating Osama bin Laden, something George W. Bush was never able to do, but that's another story, but it's a fact. But I would say overall, we've done a very good job there. Our military has done an excellent job. And as the proud son of a United States Army drill sergeant father, which my dad served in the Army very honorably, and it was also a Union man too, I would add. I think we've done very well, and I'm very proud of our men and women in uniform. I think they've done a very good job, and it made all of us proud.
Well, no doubt about that, and we thank your dad, obviously, for his service to our country. Whitley, your thoughts on how the administration has handled it?
This is not about the men and women in uniform who consistently risk their lives for our freedom. This is about the complete and utter disaster and dumpster fire of the Biden administration, who couldn't plan their way out of a paper bag. There's no doubt that we needed to leave, but the method in which we left has been terrible. We watched people fall to their deaths, scale jet bridges like Spider-Man. We left billions of dollars of equipment, and we have over 10,000 people, American citizens, who are stranded or potentially stuck in Afghanistan trying to climb over fences to get into the airport. And so to hear Brian say that we've done a good job is just gaslighting. The Biden administration is a complete dumpster fire. He has absolutely no direction. He should fire every single person that advised him that this was the right thing to do.
Okay, well, to that point, though, Whitley, in your opinion, what should the Biden administration have done differently?
Well, I think they should have evacuated the U.S. citizens and our allies before pulling back so many military troops and then having to try to send them back in. I don't think that it was well thought out. I think that he received some misinformation. He already had changed President Trump's original plan. And so we're working off of whatever Biden and his administration feel is best. And now we're watching this crisis go from being us trying to secure our national security and have an exit strategy that's great to now it's a humanitarian crisis.
Brian, I'll let you respond.
Well, first of all, that's just hyperbolic on Whitley's part to say that he couldn't work his way out of a paper bag. That's just, first of all, that's not accurate at all. President Biden, I think, did the best job he could under the circumstances. Trying to get out of that country was not going to be easy. We do have troops on the ground that are trying to get as many Americans out, and our Afghan allies. We're not going to abandon them. We're getting them out. We're getting thousands of people out. Every day as we speak, we're getting thousands of Americans and Afghan allies out. And the Taliban knows not to go after any Americans or our Afghan allies. We do have soldiers and Marines on the ground. We have Air Force there to provide air cover for our soldiers and Marines. And they know that if they try anything, they're going to feel the hammer and the power of the United States military that's going to pound them. So they're not going to do anything. I have more faith in our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and the policy than it seems like my good friend Whitley has.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens there. Whitley, to be fair here, isn't this what a lot of Americans, most Americans, I should say, have said they wanted to see over the years, including the former president who came up with the plan to get everyone out of the country? I don't know if it was by September 11th, but definitely this year.
Absolutely. I don't think the question is not, do we want our troops home and do we want to exit Afghanistan? The problem is the strategy and the way in which it was done. There was no plan. We don't have a plan to bring home our U.S. citizens. We don't have an airport that we can safely pick them up at. Even on Friday, when they were speaking to us, they were talking about American citizens having to scale a fence to get access to the airport. And the problem is that we as American people don't have a plan from the current administration to remedy the situation, to keep our Americans safe and to get them home safely. And our president hasn't been the most forthright and will answer really any questions from anybody. And so we're stuck watching this happen, and we don't have any direction from the current leadership. And I'm really disappointed.
Brian, is this a long-term issue? Specifically, are we going to be talking about this time next year, right before the midterms?
Absolutely not. And the problem with the Republicans, they don't have any issues to run on. They're running on culture issues. They don't have any ideas about the economy. The economy's coming back. We're getting Americans back to work. When it comes to COVID, talk about a dumpster fire. That's the Republican Party's response on COVID. Has been completely disastrous. From former President Donald Trump, twice impeached. Enjoy saying that, former President Donald Trump.
Whitley,
we're
running out of time, so I can't really get into COVID today. But Whitley, I want to get your response. Will we be talking about this next year come midterm
Absolutely. And I think that we will still be trying to get Americans from Afghanistan back to the United States by the midterms. Absolutely. Because we don't have any leadership currently with the Biden administration.
All right, we'll see what happens. All right. Brian Whitley, always good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Take All Indiana Politics on the go with you. Download our podcast now. Part of the All Indiana Podcast Network and allindianapodcastnetwork.com.
And thank you for joining us for another edition of All Indiana Politics on this Sunday. This week, we will continue to watch what's happening in Afghanistan and in the unemployment crisis. We may also see movement on redistricting here in Indiana. We'll, of course, be back here next Sunday morning, 9:30. And don't forget, our All Indiana Politics podcast. It's part of the All Indiana Podcast Network at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.